Morning came slowly to Red Valley. Gray clouds still clung to the mountain peaks after the night storm, casting long shadows across the valley floor. Smoke drifted faintly from the blackened side of Naomi Carter's cabin, while rainwater slid steadily from the roof Jacob had fought to save. The clearing smelled of wet earth, ash, and pine. Naomi stood near the porch, wrapped in her mother's shawl, staring silently at the scorched boards along the cabin wall. Exhaustion weighed heavily beneath her eyes, but something stronger held her upright now. She was no longer standing alone. Behind her, the cabin door creaked open. Jacob Hayes stepped outside, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. His white shirt had been replaced by a dark work shirt, rolled high at the sleeves, revealing forearms marked with soot and small burns from the fire. Without a word, he handed 1 cup to Naomi. Their fingers brushed again. The small touch still sent warmth rushing unexpectedly through her chest. "You should rest," Jacob said quietly. Naomi shook her head. "If I stop moving, I'll start thinking." Jacob leaned one shoulder against the porch post beside her. "About the fire?" "About everything." Her voice came softer now. "My father, this land, the town. Sometimes it feels like Red Valley's been waiting for me to fail from the beginning." Jacob studied her carefully over the rim of his cup. "And yet you're still standing." Naomi gave a faint, humorless laugh. "Barely." Before Jacob could answer, the distant sound of hooves broke through the quiet morning air. Both of them stiffened instantly. Jacob's hand moved automatically toward the revolver resting low at his hip. A cloud of dust rose along the narrow road leading toward the cabin. Riders, 5 of them. Naomi's stomach tightened hard. "Alden's men," she whispered. The riders emerged from the trees moments later. At their front rode Morrison, the mayor's favored enforcer. Thin-faced and sharp-eyed, Morrison wore a cruel smile that deepened when he noticed the fire damage along the cabin wall. "Well now," he drawled loudly, "looks like somebody had themselves a rough night." Jacob stepped slightly in front of Naomi. The movement was subtle, protective. Morrison noticed it immediately. His smile widened. "Here the colored healer finally found herself a husband, though I can't imagine what kind of fool ties himself to a sinking ship." Naomi felt heat rise sharply in her chest. Before she could speak, Jacob's voice cut across the clearing like cold steel. "Careful what comes out of your mouth." Morrison laughed lightly, though tension flickered behind his eyes. "Touchy fellow, ain't he?" One of the riders behind him shifted in the saddle, fingers twitching near his pistol. Jacob saw it instantly and moved faster than breath. His Colt cleared leather in one smooth, deadly motion. The barrel leveled directly at the rider's chest. Silence slammed across the clearing. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Naomi stared at Jacob in stunned disbelief. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't flinched, but suddenly every man there understood exactly how dangerous he really was. Jacob's storm-gray eyes never blinked. "Try it," he said softly. "See which one of us dies first." The rider froze completely. Morrison's smirk faltered. Naomi felt her pulse hammering wildly as she watched Jacob stand between her and 5 armed men without the slightest hesitation. For the first time, she fully understood something important. Jacob Hayes had not married her for convenience alone. He was willing to fight for her. Morrison finally raised one hand slowly. "Easy now," he muttered. "We only came to deliver a message." Jacob's aim never wavered. "Then deliver it." Morrison's expression darkened. "Mayor Alden says this marriage changes nothing. That land will belong to him soon enough, one way or another." Naomi stepped forward then. Her fear remained, but something stronger rose beside it now. Defiance. She moved to stand beside Jacob, shoulders straight beneath her shawl. "This land belonged to my father, and now it belongs to me and my husband." The word husband felt different now, stronger, real. Morrison's eyes narrowed coldly. "You think folks in Red Valley will stand behind you, behind him?" He sneered openly. "A drifter and a colored woman?" Naomi lifted her chin. "They already are." For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered across Morrison's face. The town was changing. Alden could feel it slipping. Jacob slowly lowered his revolver, but only halfway. "Tell Alden something from me," he said quietly. Morrison waited. Jacob's gaze hardened like winter stone. "You set fire to this cabin once. Next time you come near my wife again," his voice dropped lower, "you better come ready to bury your dead." The threat settled heavily across the clearing.
No bluff, no performance, promise. Even Morrison swallowed once before forcing a crooked grin. This ain't over. Jacob's expression never changed. It never is. At last, Morrison jerked his reins sharply and turned his horse. The other riders followed quickly behind him, eager to leave the clearing alive. Soon only drifting dust remained behind. Silence returned. Naomi released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Jacob holstered his revolver slowly. Only then did Naomi notice the slight tension still locked through his shoulders. "You really would have shot him?" she whispered. Jacob looked toward the empty road. If he reached for his gun, yes. Naomi stared at him quietly, not afraid, not anymore, because beneath the danger, beneath the hardened gunfighter standing beside her, she saw something else now. Loyalty, fierce and unshakable. Jacob finally turned toward her. "You all right?" Naomi stepped closer slowly, until only inches separated them. Then, without overthinking it, she reached up and touched soot still lingering along his jaw from the fire. Jacob went completely still beneath her fingertips. "You stood for me," she whispered. Storm gray eyes locked on hers. "Always will." The words wrapped around Naomi's heart like firelight in winter. And standing there beside the smoke-scarred cabin, with the mountains rising behind them and danger still circling ahead, Naomi realized she had stopped fearing the future, because Jacob Hayes stood inside it.
The sun climbed hot and merciless over Red Valley by midday, burning away the last traces of storm clouds that had rolled through during the night. Dust swirled thick across the mining roads, where men moved like shadows beneath the weight of exhaustion. Near the edge of the silver pit, a crowd had gathered outside a crooked wooden shack. Whispers spread fast through town. A miner's boy was dying. Naomi Carter heard the murmurs the moment she stepped onto Main Street with her satchel slung across her shoulder. Faces turned toward her now in a different way than before, not entirely free of suspicion, but no longer filled only with hatred. Something had shifted since the fire. Since Jacob Hayes began standing openly beside her. "She's coming," someone whispered. "Miss Carter's here." A woman suddenly rushed from the crowd, tears streaking through dust on her cheeks. "Please," she begged, clutching Naomi's hands tightly. "Please help my boy. Doc Morrison won't come." Naomi's expression hardened instantly. "Why not?" "He says we can't pay." Anger flickered hot beneath Naomi's calm exterior. Jacob stepped closer behind her, one hand resting near the revolver at his side. "Take us there," Naomi said firmly. The shack leaned dangerously beside the mining road, half swallowed beneath clouds of silver dust drifting down from the canyon walls. Inside, heat clung heavily to the cramped room. A young boy lay trembling on a narrow cot. No older than 12, his breathing rattled harshly in his chest, while sweat soaked through his thin shirt. Beside him sat his father, rough hands trembling helplessly. When Naomi entered, the man nearly fell to his knees. "Miss Carter, please don't let him die." Naomi crossed quickly to the bedside. Years of training beside her father took over instantly. She touched the boy's forehead. Too hot. Listened to his breathing. Dust fever. The mines had poisoned his lungs. "Open the windows," Naomi ordered calmly. The father scrambled to obey. "Boil water quickly." Jacob moved without hesitation, grabbing the kettle from the stove while Naomi unpacked herbs and jars from her satchel with practiced speed. Outside, more townsfolk crowded near the doorway, watching anxiously. Nobody spoke loudly. Nobody mocked her now. They watched Naomi work with desperate hope in their eyes. Jacob noticed it too. He stood quietly near the doorway like a silent wall between Naomi and the world, while she crushed willow bark and mint leaves together into a steaming mixture. Her hands shook faintly from exhaustion after the fire, but her voice never wavered. "Lift his head carefully." The father obeyed immediately. Naomi guided the medicine slowly between the boy's lips while murmuring softly to keep him calm. "There you go," she whispered gently. "Easy now." The boy coughed violently before swallowing. Minutes dragged by painfully. The room remained deathly quiet except for the boy's ragged breathing and the crackle of fire beneath the kettle. Jacob watched Naomi closely, watched the concentration tightening her brow, watched sweat gather along her dark skin while she fought for a child nobody else cared enough to save.
and something inside him shifted deeper still. Because Naomi never hesitated, not once. Even after everything Red Valley had done to her, she still chose compassion. An hour passed slowly. Then suddenly the boy's breathing eased, only slightly, but enough. Naomi checked his pulse again carefully. Stronger. The father noticed it too. Tears filled the man's eyes. "He's breathing easier," he whispered shakily. Naomi finally allowed herself one exhausted breath. "He's through the worst part," she murmured. The room erupted instantly. Relief swept through the shack like a storm breaking open. The boy's mother collapsed into sobs, while neighbors crowded the doorway, praising God aloud. Outside, word spread rapidly down the mining road. Naomi Carter saved the boy. Again and again the whispers traveled. She did what Morrison refused. She stayed. She saved him. Naomi rose too quickly from beside the bed. The room tilted violently around her. Exhaustion crashed into her all at once after sleepless nights, fear, fire, and strain. Before she could fall, strong arms caught her. "Jacob." Naomi's breath caught sharply as his arm wrapped securely around her waist, steadying her against his chest. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. The concern in his voice affected her more than it should have. "I'm fine," Naomi said automatically. Jacob's eyebrow lifted slightly. That sounded familiar. Despite her exhaustion, Naomi laughed softly. The sound warmed something deep in Jacob's chest. Outside, the gathered miners began chanting softly. "Carter." More voices joined. "Carter." The sound swelled stronger across the dusty road until the entire crowd echoed her name. Naomi's eyes filled unexpectedly with tears. Jacob leaned slightly closer beside her. "Told you, you're not alone anymore." Naomi turned toward him slowly. Their faces ended up close again, too close. Storm-gray eyes met hers with unmistakable warmth now. No distance remained between them anymore, only something growing stronger every day. Outside, Red Valley continued chanting Naomi's name beneath the blazing western sun. But inside that tiny mining shack, Naomi heard only Jacob's voice. And for the first time since her father died, hope no longer felt dangerous.
The old church of Red Valley had been transformed into a courtroom by sunrise. Dusty pews faced a raised wooden platform where Judge Theodore Carver now sat beneath a faded flag of the territory. Light filtered weakly through cracked windows, laying pale streaks across crowded benches packed with townsfolk hungry for spectacle. Whispers crawled through the room like insects. Naomi Carter sat near the front beside Jacob Hayes, her satchel resting tightly against her lap. Though she held her back straight, tension wound visibly through her body. Today was no ordinary hearing. Today they meant to destroy her. Across the aisle, Mayor Victor Alden sat stiff and polished in a black coat despite the heat. Beside him lingered Morrison, thin lips curled in satisfaction. Alden's eyes slid toward Naomi with cold confidence. He believed the town still belonged to him. Jacob noticed Naomi's fingers trembling against the satchel strap. Without speaking, he placed his rough hand gently over hers. Warmth spread instantly through her chest. She glanced sideways at him. Jacob gave one calm nod. "I'm here." The silent message steadied her more than words could. Judge Carver struck the gavel sharply. "This court is now in session." The whispers faded. Alden rose smoothly to his feet. "Your Honor," he began loudly, "the people of Red Valley deserve protection from deception and dangerous practices masquerading as medicine." Naomi's jaw tightened immediately. Alden paced slowly before the crowd like a preacher delivering scripture. "This woman," he continued, pointing openly toward Naomi, "claims to heal through powders, roots, and charms. She spreads superstition among honest folk while refusing proper medical authority." Murmurs rippled through the benches. Jacob's expression darkened beside Naomi. Alden's voice grew colder. "I further submit that Naomi Carter poisoned her own father through these unnatural practices in order to seize his land and silver holdings." Gasps exploded across the church. Naomi froze completely. The accusation struck like a physical blow.
Beside her, Jacob stiffened instantly. "That's a lie," Naomi whispered hoarsely. Alden ignored her. Witnesses were called one after another. A nervous rancher claimed he'd seen Naomi muttering strange words over medicine bottles. A frightened woman swore Naomi used gray powders that worsened fevers. Each accusation tightened the tension inside the church. Naomi's breathing grew shallow. She knew exactly what this truly was. Not justice, fear, punishment for daring to rise above the place Red Valley assigned her. Jacob leaned slightly closer. "Don't let them break you," he murmured. Naomi swallowed hard. "I'm trying." The courtroom doors suddenly burst open. Everyone jumped. A gaunt man stumbled inside, nearly collapsing against the pews. His clothes hung wrinkled and filthy, while sweat drenched his face despite the cool church air. Jacob recognized him instantly, the chemist from Amarillo. The man dropped to his knees in the aisle. "Your Honor," he gasped brokenly, "I have to confess." The room fell deathly silent. Even Alden stiffened sharply. The chemist pointed a shaking finger toward the mayor. "It was Alden. He paid me to poison Elijah Carter." Chaos erupted. Voices exploded through the church, while Judge Carver slammed the gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order!" The chemist wept openly now. "Alden gave me gold to lace Elijah's medicine, said the old man's death would free up the land." His voice cracked painfully. "I couldn't live with it anymore." Naomi felt the entire world tilt sideways. Her father, murdered. The truth she'd feared for months suddenly stood naked before the whole town. Tears flooded her eyes before she could stop them. Beside her, Jacob caught her instantly as her knees weakened beneath her. Alden surged to his feet furiously. "This is madness," he roared. "The ramblings of a drunk criminal prove nothing." But the room had changed. Whispers now turned against him. People stared at Alden differently, fearfully, suspiciously. Judge Carver's face tightened grimly. Then Jacob Hayes stood up. The movement alone silenced nearly the entire church. Tall, broad-shouldered, dangerous, but it was the fire in his storm-gray eyes that held the room captive. Jacob stepped forward slowly. "You accuse Naomi Carter because she's different, because she's a woman, because her skin makes men like Alden think she should bow her head and surrender what belongs to her." No one interrupted. No one dared. Jacob's voice lowered deeper. "But while this town mocked her, Naomi healed your children. While Morrison turned away the poor, she stayed beside the sick." His gaze swept across the benches. "And now truth stands right before you." Naomi stared at him breathlessly. Jacob turned toward her then. Something vulnerable flickered across his hardened face, something real. "When I first came to Red Valley, I thought this marriage was business." Naomi's heart stopped. Jacob's eyes locked onto hers fully now. But somewhere between the fire, the fighting, and watching this woman carry an entire town on her shoulders, he drew one slow breath. "I fell in love with her." The church went completely still. Naomi felt tears spill freely down her cheeks. Jacob continued softly. "I stand here today not because of land or silver." His voice roughened slightly. "I stand here because Naomi Carter became the best thing that ever happened to me." Emotion broke violently inside her. No one had ever chosen her openly before, not publicly, not proudly. Judge Carver leaned back heavily in his chair. The old judge studied Naomi for a long moment before lifting the gavel. "This court rejects all charges of witchcraft and unlawful medical practice against Naomi Carter." Cheers exploded through the church. Alden shouted furiously, but no one listened anymore. The town's loyalty had shifted. Jacob turned back toward Naomi just as she rose shakily to her feet. For one suspended moment, the noise around them disappeared completely. Only the two of them remained. Naomi reached for him first. Jacob met her halfway. His hand closed around hers tightly, while emotion burned openly between them now. No contract, no bargain, no pretending anymore, only truth. And as the people of Red Valley erupted around them, Naomi realized something powerful. Love entered her life the same way Jacob Hayes had, quietly, unexpectedly, and strong enough to change everything.
The morning after the trial dawned brighter than any Red Valley had seen in years. Sunlight spilled across the mountains in waves of gold, warming rooftops still damp from recent storms. The town square, once heavy with suspicion and fear, now carried something unfamiliar: hope. Men opened their shops earlier than usual. Women swept dust from porches, while children chased one another between wagon wheels, laughing loudly enough to echo through the valley. And everywhere, people whispered the same names: Naomi Carter, Jacob Hayes. Outside the county jail near the edge of town, Victor Alden sat behind iron bars awaiting transfer to the district court. His power had shattered overnight like glass beneath a hammer. Red Valley was changing. Naomi stood on the porch of her cabin, watching the valley slowly wake. Her apron carried faint traces of dried herbs, while loose curls brushed softly against her cheeks in the morning breeze. For the first time in months, her chest no longer felt crushed beneath fear. The church trial had changed everything, not only because Alden fell, but because Jacob had spoken the truth aloud before the whole town. I fell in love with her. Those words still echoed inside her heart. Behind her, the cabin door opened. Jacob stepped outside, carrying lumber over one shoulder. He had spent most of the morning repairing the section of wall burned during the fire attack. Sweat darkened the collar of his work shirt, while sunlight caught along the rough lines of his face. Naomi watched him quietly and smiled. Jacob noticed instantly. "That look means trouble," he said dryly. Naomi shook her head, amusement warming her eyes. "I was just thinking. Dangerous habit." She shook her head, amusement warming her eyes. "You've changed this place." Jacob set the lumber down beside the porch. "No," he answered calmly. "You did." Naomi leaned lightly against the porch rail. "A few months ago, half this town wouldn't even look me in the eye. And now?" Before Naomi could answer, voices rose from the road below. "Miss Carter!" A group of townsfolk approached carrying baskets, tools, and bundles of supplies. Miners walked beside merchants. Women carried fresh bread, while several children dragged lumber pieces nearly too large for them to manage. Naomi blinked in surprise. An older miner stepped forward awkwardly. "Figured your cabin could use some fixin' after the fire." Another woman lifted a basket. "Brought stew, too." Naomi stared speechless as more people gathered around the yard. Not out of curiosity, not mockery. Community. Jacob crossed his arms beside her, watching quietly. "Told you," he murmured. Emotion tightened sharply inside Naomi's throat. A few months earlier, these same people crossed streets to avoid her. Now they had come to help rebuild her home. The older miner rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "We should have stood by you sooner," he admitted. "Truth is, we were scared." Naomi stepped slowly down from the porch. Fear once would have made her bitter, but now she understood it too well. "You're here now," she said softly. That was enough. The day unfolded into something Red Valley had nearly forgotten how to be: joyful. Men repaired fencing around the property, while women gathered inside the cabin preparing food. Laughter drifted through the clearing beneath warm western sunlight. Children chased chickens between the trees. And through it all, Jacob remained near Naomi, always close enough to reach her if needed, always watching. At dusk, the townsfolk finally drifted back toward the valley, leaving the cabin glowing softly beneath the evening sky. Silence settled gently across the clearing once more. Naomi stood near the porch steps, watching the last wagon disappear down the road. "It feels strange," she admitted quietly. Jacob stepped beside her. "What does?" She smiled faintly. "Belonging somewhere." Jacob looked toward her slowly. "You always belonged here." Naomi's eyes lowered. "Most people didn't think so. I'm not most people." The quiet certainty in his voice made her heart stumble. The sun dipped lower behind the mountains, washing the clearing in deep crimson light. Jacob disappeared briefly inside the cabin. When he returned, he carried a weathered leather bag in one hand and his old trail coat draped over the other arm. Naomi frowned slightly. "What's that?" Jacob stopped directly in front of her. "My things." Confusion flickered across her face. "You already live here." "Not officially." Naomi stared at him silently. Jacob glanced toward the cabin. "When we married, I kept thinking this would end eventually. Thought maybe once the land was safe, I'd move on again." Naomi's chest tightened painfully at the idea. Jacob noticed instantly. But somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling temporary. He stepped closer, close enough for Naomi to feel warmth radiating from him in the cool evening air. This cabin stopped feeling like shelter. His storm-gray eyes locked onto hers, started feeling like home. Naomi felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly. Jacob lifted the leather bag slightly. "So, I figured maybe it's time I actually move in." A watery laugh escaped her before she could stop it. "You ridiculous man." Jacob's mouth curved faintly upward. "Is that a yes?" Naomi looked past him toward the cabin. Her father's cabin, the lonely place where she once believed she would spend the rest of her life isolated from the world. Now Jacob's coat hung beside her shawl near the door. Now his boots rested beside hers at night. Now his voice filled the silence she once feared. Slowly, Naomi stepped closer and rested one hand softly against his chest. Beneath her palm, his heartbeat thudded strong and steady. "Yes," she whispered. Jacob's expression gentled completely then. He set the bag down and wrapped one arm carefully around her waist. Naomi leaned against him willingly, naturally, like she had always belonged there. Above them, the first stars emerged across the darkening western sky, and warm light glowed through the cabin windows behind them. And standing together on that quiet porch, Naomi realized something extraordinary. Red Valley had not only become her home again, it had become theirs. 6 months later, Red Valley no longer looked like the broken town Naomi Carter once feared would swallow her whole. The change could be seen from the moment the morning sun rose over the mountains. Fresh timber framed newly repaired homes. Flower boxes rested beneath windows that had once been boarded shut. Wagons rolled steadily through the square, carrying goods from neighboring territories, now that Jacob Hayes' transport routes connected Red Valley to the outside world. Life had returned. Children laughed openly in the streets without shrinking from drunken men. The old fairground had reopened near the riverbank, and every Saturday evening music drifted through town beneath strings of lantern light. Most remarkable of all was the little whitewashed building near the eastern road, the schoolhouse. Beside it stood Naomi Carter's clinic, its windows thrown open to the cool mountain air. Shelves inside overflowed with herbs, medicines, journals, and remedies gathered through years of healing work. Folks traveled miles now seeking the healer of Red Valley, and no one whispered the word witch anymore. Inside the clinic, Naomi tied off a bandage around a young miner's injured hand as his mother watched gratefully nearby. "You keep that clean 2 days," Naomi instructed gently, "and stay out of the mine until swelling's gone." The miner nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." After they left, Naomi moved toward the doorway and paused there quietly. Across the street, Jacob Hayes stood helping 2 men unload supply crates from a wagon. Sunlight burned gold across his dark hair, while his rolled sleeves revealed strong arms marked by old scars and months of honest labor. He no longer looked like a drifting gunman passing through town. He looked rooted, belonging. Jacob glanced up suddenly, as though sensing her eyes on him. The moment he spotted Naomi, his entire expression softened. Even after 6 months, that look still stole her breath. A small smile touched his mouth. Naomi smiled back instinctively. The connection between them remained effortless now, woven quietly into every glance, every touch, every shared silence. Later that evening, sunset drenched Red Valley in deep shades of crimson and amber. Music drifted faintly from the reopened fairground, while lanterns flickered awake one by one across town. Naomi walked home along the narrow trail leading toward the cabin beneath the pines. Their cabin. Jacob waited on the porch, sharpening a small knife with a whetstone. The rhythmic scrape paused immediately when he saw her approaching. "You're late," he said calmly. Naomi stepped onto the porch with a tired laugh. 3 sick children and a stubborn miner with a broken wrist. Jacob rose slowly to his feet. "You ever think about resting?" "Do you?" "Fair point." Naomi smiled warmly. The cabin behind him glowed golden through the windows. Smoke curled gently from the chimney into the cooling evening sky. Home. Real home. Jacob stepped closer, taking the satchel gently from her shoulder before she could protest. "You work too hard," he murmured. Naomi watched him quietly. There was tenderness in everything he did now. Not dramatic, not loud, simply constant, like breathing. Jacob set the satchel inside the doorway before turning back toward her. For a moment, neither spoke. Crimson sunset painted the clearing around them, while wind moved softly through the pine branches overhead. Then Jacob broke the silence. "Naomi?" Something in his voice made her heart stumble. She looked up slowly. Storm-gray eyes held hers with unusual seriousness. "When we first met," he began quietly, "you stood in the middle of town and ordered a stranger into your bed." Naomi covered her face instantly with one hand, groaning softly. "Jacob!" He laughed quietly for the first time in days. "I'm serious." Heat rushed into Naomi's cheeks. "I was desperate." "I know," his expression softened again, "but I think about that moment sometimes." Naomi lowered her hand carefully. "What about it?"
Jacob stepped closer until barely inches separated them. "You were terrified," he said softly, "and still brave enough to fight for your life anyway." Emotion tightened unexpectedly in Naomi's chest. Jacob reached up slowly, brushing his knuckles gently against her cheek. "You changed me, Naomi Carter." Her breath caught. Before she could answer, Jacob continued. "When I spent most of my life drifting from one place to another, never stayed long enough to belong anywhere, then somehow you turned this valley into home." Naomi's eyes filled instantly with tears. "So did you," she whispered. Jacob's thumb brushed lightly beneath her eye, catching one escaping tear. "No," he said quietly, "you gave me something better than a home." Naomi searched his face helplessly. "What?" A slow smile touched his mouth. "A reason to stay." The words broke something open inside her heart completely. Naomi stepped into him without hesitation, both hands clutching the front of his shirt as she kissed him deeply beneath the reddened western sky. Jacob's arms wrapped tightly around her instantly, pulling her fully against him. The kiss carried everything they had survived together: fire, fear, loneliness, love. When they finally pulled apart, Naomi rested her forehead against his chest while his heartbeat thundered steady beneath her ear. Below the hillside, lanterns flickered across Red Valley like scattered stars. The town had changed, and so had they. Once, Naomi Carter believed survival would be enough, but standing in Jacob Hayes' arms beneath the darkening sky, she understood something greater now. Love had not simply saved her inheritance, it had rebuilt an entire town. And as the first stars appeared overhead, Jacob tightened his hold on her gently, while the warm light from their cabin spilled across the porch behind them. Neither feared tomorrow anymore, because whatever came next, they would face it together.